Hello and welcome everybody to our MPM Skills 101 monthly webcast series. My name is Eric Desmond from the Global Customer Success Team, and I will be your moderator today. Today's presenters are Michael Lebeau and Val Milas. The material covered today will include Enterprise Reporter installation, configuration, and reporting. This session will be recorded, and we will be sending everyone in the registration list a link to the recording within 72 hours for future use. Feel free to ask your questions through the chat so that it can be addressed by Michael and Val from our Quest team. Please note, if you choose to put a question in the chat, your first and last name will appear. We're mentioning this so you're aware for basic privacy reasons. With that, I'll hand the webcast over to Michael and Val. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. I do appreciate everyone for joining, learning Enterprise Reporter installation, configuration, and reporting. We are Michael and Val at your service today. And then talking about Enterprise Reporter, this is a large solution that Quest offers our customers. And many of you have been using it, but not to the full extent that it could be used. Now, we do have the ability to inventory objects and the permissions across multiple domains, forests, and or platforms that allow you to see who's got access to what on the servers in AD and across the entire network. This ensures security and compliance when you're using these reports to make sure that the access is controlled. All of the reports are scalable, secure, and customizable. And this will work with large, complex Windows environments, especially the hybrid environments that we're all enjoying today. When we talk about Enterprise Reporter, we have to focus on the architecture. This is a SQL Server database back-ended solution. So when it comes to SQL, you have to understand that all of that data that we are gathering from every system, whether it's Active Directory, Windows file servers, SQL information, or Exchange, or perhaps information from the cloud, all of that gets stored in the database. So the questions are, is it backed up? Is it restorable? Do you need to move it or merge it? And so there's one database per installation of Enterprise Reporter. And that means everything from the multiple forests and gatherings are going to go into that database. And because of that, most of the people that use Enterprise Reporter are not DBAs. They have to work with the database team or they need tools. And we give you two sets of tools with Enterprise Reporter, the Database Wizard and the Database Content Wizard. Now, the Database Wizard is designed to create databases, upgrade them, launch the Database Content Wizard. You can even remove or change the security mode of the database and perform maintenance on that database. And that would be any kind of maintenance job that you want to run against the database based on SQL. And then we have the Database Content Wizard. This one takes a little bit more understanding, as this allows us to transfer configuration settings and data from one database to another, or back up the database, or restore the database from backup. So all of that can be done through tools provided through Enterprise Reporter. We also have the ability to clean up the collected data. Because the data that Enterprise Reporter does collect stays in that database, the database has a tendency to grow over time, especially if you're collecting historical data, which is possible with Enterprise Reporter. So you have the ability to selectively clean out the data based on data type and time ranges. And then in the event that you want to bring two different databases together, say you're merging domains and you want to combine the data from two different instances of Enterprise Reporter, there's a merge function ready to go. And alternatively, if you have scripts provided by our support team or home-rolled scripts that you want to run against the database, we have the ability to inject those custom scripts into the database without opening up SQL Server Manager. Now, in the architecture, the gatherings and discoveries are always a question that us engineers get. How many nodes should I have? Can a node run one job, or a node can run one job at a time? So if you need to run, in number of gatherings, you should have at least n nodes. And every node can have a different set of credentials to run a gathering of subset of your environment. what that does, those two combinations, the two combinations there, you have the ability to create what we call a cluster and then put as many nodes underneath that cluster as needed. Certain jobs have an option to load balance across each of those nodes, or alternatively, if you're collecting data from multiple data sources, those data collections can be distributed across multiple nodes to speed up your collection. And so if you do have environments where there are servers that are standalone, you need to reach out to another server with a different set of credentials, you could easily supply a different set of credentials for each one of the nodes in order to have administrative type access to whatever data source that you're gathering. So as I mentioned, the gathering jobs are assigned to a cluster. The nodes are a part of that cluster, and that cluster will manage the distribution of the gathering jobs across each one of those nodes. And some of those gatherings can be split automatically, as I mentioned previously, along the domain lines so that multiple available nodes can be engaged in a given job. The entire goal is to collect as much data as possible through multiple nodes as quickly as possible. And then there's the report manager. This is a question I get all the time, is how this can be leveraged. Well, the report manager, first and foremost, is freely distributable. So you don't have to have it in a single server location. You can distribute this amongst all of your workstations. So anyone who needs to run the queries has the ability to do that from their desktop. Whether the reports will be the stock reports or modified, the users have the ability to schedule and deliver the reports to mailboxes or shared folders should they desire to do so. This will provide a management console for those users so they can modify the reports, the data scope for the reports, such as any kind of filters that they're using, changing the layout, the columns, anything that's necessary. And then we also allow the selection of columns and the headers for the CSV report. There's a typical process that most of my users go through of running a report, having it render, and then trying to export it to CSV. That comes out in a fully formatted report in a CSV. It doesn't look good, but there's other options in Enterprise Reporter that can help export that CSV data quickly and easily. And then, of course, it also can expose the underlying SQL query for direct database access. For those of you that like SQL, this is a great way to look at what's actually going on under the covers. Now, we also have, with the Enterprise Reporter Suite, we include a solution called Security Explorer. This is the actionable arm of Enterprise Reporter. And with the Security Reporter and Enterprise Reporter integration that you do get with the suite, you can quickly take action from within the Enterprise Reporter user interface, and that's the reporting interface, to remove or adjust any inappropriate permissions. Now, the Security Explorer not only runs in conjunction with Enterprise Reporter, but can also be run standalone. And this could be used to grant, revoke, clone, modify, and overwrite permissions from a central location across multiple platforms that include NTFS, your shares, your services, all the way down to Active Directory. And of course, all of those targets are all on-prem with Security Explorer. So it's great to hear about what you can do. It's even better to go about and see what you can do within Enterprise Reporter. A lot of things that some people are missing. So the database utilities are typically found in the installation directory for Enterprise Reporter. Anytime you click on the Quest item, you'll see the database content wizard and the database wizard readily available. I have both of those up, ready to go. So we can take a look at these. The database utility, whether you need to transfer the data, this will allow you to transfer the data in between two databases, and this will bring over all the configuration data that you may have. Backing up and restoring, very easy. It's point and click. Cleaning up the data allows you to drive into the data, select your data type and the date range of how you want to clean or remove that data, And of course, we can always merge that data or run a script. Alternatively, if we need to readjust the database itself, say you have a requirement that you need to spin up another database for archiving, or you're going to perform an upgrade, you have the option to come in and use the wizard to drive through the entire process in creating, upgrading. If you want to launch the content wizard, it's here and available. And of course, remove a database if you've already taken all the data out and you just want to peel it off of the SQL Server. And of course, we can change the security mode or perform basic maintenance. And that's going to be compressing that database, getting rid of the white space, typical maintenance jobs that you will have. All right, from there, we have to talk about the clusters. We use this term cluster as a collection of one or more. Each one of these clusters can be created based on a forest, a domain, a site. Depends on what your strategy is for data collection. Typically, we want to put our nodes, which are part of the cluster, as close to the data as possible. But we don't have to have a node on each server that we're going to gather data from. So in this case, we've got three different areas that we're working with. We have the Sitraka, which is a forest, Titan Corp, which is a forest, and TitanCorp.net, which is our cloud. So in this case, Sitraka is fairly small. All we need is a single agent. Yet Titan Corp is much larger, and we can have multiple nodes or multiple agents placed in that cluster. And then when we assign a gathering job to that cluster, it will load balance across multiple nodes, allowing the data to be collected faster. And then for our cloud gathering, we do have specific requirements for the node for the cloud. There are some PowerShell modules that we need to have in place for us to access the Azure tenant. And so we have isolated this node out so that it can have just the PowerShell modules that we need on that system in order to gather that data. So the clusters are designed to be able to go out and build the jobs, and we build the jobs through the managed discoveries. In this, depending on what cluster we're pointing to, we can see what jobs are actually being used. Take, for instance, if we're doing a Active Directory discovery, this is just one that's been run. If we edit this, we could easily see that this is assigned to the TitanCorp.net cluster. Of course, we can choose whatever cluster that we have ready to go. And then if we do need to use alternative credentials, we can always type in the credentials here, but we do have a secure storage for credentials that you can add a credential to this, and this will be stored securely in our database for reference at other times. So the solution does drive you into building out the clusters, assigning the permissions to allow you to gather the information without having to break the security or inject different security models into your data. The next piece is the report manager, where we do have to be able to pull data out. Once we put data into the database, we have to be able to retrieve it. So the reporting module gives you the ability to go in and run reports on Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, all the way down to NTFS. This does allow us to choose what reports we are going to run in order to pull that information. And of course, the data that we have returned is going to be rendered to us in a nice format. So we'll go ahead and select one of our forests here. And I'm just looking for accounts that haven't logged on in the past 30 days. A very simple report. This will run against the database, and it will render the report as soon as it has enough data available in order to produce that report. So we'll see that report render shortly, and it will pop up while we're doing the demo. Alternatively, you have the ability to run any report and export data directly to a CSV without having to render the data. So here, this comes in and says, oh, well, nobody has not logged in the last 30 days. In other words, we're very attentive here. If we were to go in and take, for instance, we wanted to look at domain accounts, this could take a long time to run a report like this with the filtering, but all we have to do if we're going to use the CSV export, is go ahead and select our domain and then export to CSV. This is an immediate dump out to a CSV file. We can save it, and it will ask us to open that file and take a look at it. And this is very clean, easy to use data. And let me drag it across to you. It's just going to come out in a simple CSV. Use that. Great. All right. Thank you, Microsoft. And so with this, we can go in and open up the columns and see anything that we want in that CSV data, not to belabor that point. However, if you want to go in and modify any one of these reports, you can copy it up to the My Reports area. It's here that you're able to go in and actually see what's going on in the report. Not only can you edit the report, which if you edit this report or start creating reports, it kind of pigeonholes you into Enterprise Reporter, where there's much more use of this data out in the wild than you would typically expect. So with these reports, not only can you customize the names, you can customize the fields and attributes in which you're collecting based on the report type. You have all the parameters available, so if you do need to have filters. And then you can see the actual SQL query that we're using in the backend. This will tell you exactly what we're doing and how complex these queries are, which makes this solution advantageous, so you don't have to write these queries yourself. Not only that, you can adjust the layout of it if you do need to adjust the layout of the report, but then you have the all-important CSV options. This does allow you to choose which fields that you're going to export and what order those are going to be exported in. Now, because having a CSV available, that opens up other options such as Power BI or other solutions from Quest where we can export or import that data and massage it a little bit further. But before we get there, we'll talk about the Security Explorer integrations. We do have a report down at the bottom. The only requirement we have for this to be enabled is that Security Explorer must be on a system in which the Enterprise Reporter reporting console is located. And so with this allows us to go in and select any one of these criteria or any one of these reports. Looking at these reports, we can run them. It is like any standard report that you may have within Enterprise Reporter. And the only thing that it's going to bring to you is the ability to go out and adjust these permissions. Now I'm picking on the NTFS permissions, and I'm just going to use a single asterisk in this value just to get all past, make it easy. And when we run this report, once this report renders, there will be hyperlinks in this report. By clicking on that hyperlink, it will open up Security Explorer. It'll ask you to back up the permissions, and then you can go and modify the permissions to your heart's content, knowing that you can restore the permissions if anything happened to go wrong once that report is run. Now, these reports can take a little bit of time to run, may have to circle back to that. You can also carry on into other areas of Enterprise Reporter and how we can leverage the rest of the tools. As I'd mentioned, you have several different output mechanisms that you can use within Enterprise Reporter. Some of those are going to be a Power BI. Let me bring this over so we can go through some of the things that we've done with just exported data from Enterprise Reporter. Because we can export this data in multiple ways, this data can be used to build out excellent informational charts. There are multiple pages here where we're looking at the computers in Active Directory, how many of them of what type, when's the last time they logged on, what type of operating systems do we have, what's the distribution of the groups, the group types, how many members in each group, and the list goes on and on. Whatever you're capable of thinking of, we can produce with Power BI. Rather than building it within the Enterprise Reporter solution, Power BI gives you the ability to take the data that we're able to produce and then render it in a way that's highly consumable for a number of different audiences depending on what their needs are, whether it needs to be tabular or graphical, that can be done. So the Power BI solution with the CSV export of Enterprise Reporter is quite handy in order to take the data that you've collected and present it in new, in different ways that makes that data that you're collecting that much more consumable. So back to the slide presentation, how can the reports be consumed? Well, you have the basic UI within Enterprise Reporter that everyone knows and is familiar with. However, we have a solution that is with the Enterprise Reporter purchase free to you called IT Security Search. This solution does allow you to hook into the Enterprise Reporter database as well as the back end of other solutions such as Change Auditor and pull in a Google type interface information for a particular user. So essentially, you can type in just a user's name and it will go out and find everywhere where that user has some permissions or is ownership of a file, depends on what that user has access to as to what it'll expose. There's also the Knowledge Portal. The Knowledge Portal is technology that uses SSRS, that's a SQL Server reporting service, that allows you to export reports to it, that allows user to go into the portal and run the reports ad hoc anytime they want to, but those reports are limited to the constraints that you supply. And then as I mentioned, with the CSV export, you have the Excel or the Power BI to select, filter, pivot, or chart any necessary data directly from the ER database. And we've already shown you the examples of that. The IT security search, as I mentioned previously, is going to pull the data directly out of the Enterprise Reporter database, but we're going to pull in your Active Directory and computer information, NTFS, Azure Active Directory, your resources from Azure, Microsoft Teams, and OneDrive. All of this gets pulled into a Google-like search mechanism, which makes going in and running ad hoc or security queries quite easy to do. So the IT security search does give us that capability of extending what Enterprise Reporter can do. Right, that's, I encourage anyone to have any questions, we can answer those immediately. Otherwise, we do have a NPM Skills 101 survey that if you would like to go in and put in your comments on this presentation, we'd love to hear those from you at this moment. With that, I'll go ahead and I'll hand things back to our moderator, Eric.
Thank you for joining today's session, and thank you to our presenters, Michael and Val.